Hello everyone, this is Arthur, or E.G. Arthur if you prefer, and this is a debut of a new plugin by the name of GenOut, which is short for Generic Outputter. And when I say new plugin, I guess I have to put that in air quotes because it's actually a fork of an existing plugin. And for those not familiar with software jargon, a fork is when you take an existing code base and you evolve it and move it in a different direction. And the existing plugin is called Alerter by Garan, who is the author of a number of popular plugins like Alt Inventory and More Map and Terrain Map, among others. But I'm taking that code, Garan's code, and I'm moving it in a different direction. I've added some significant new features, and also I'm kind of changing the emphasis. Garan mostly focused on the triggering aspect of Alerter, the fact that it can watch chat messages and then automatically trigger an alert, which that capability is still there. And in fact, I've expanded on that capability, but I want to change the emphasis more to the output, because to me, that's where the plugin really distinguishes itself in all the different ways that you can customize and tweak how the output occurs. So normally when I talk about a piece of software, I would discuss the basic functionality before I talk about the features of the latest release. But since this is the initial release of a fork, I'm going to do things kind of backwards. I'm going to refer folks to the Alerter documentation or the GenOut documentation, which I've refreshed, just to get an idea of the basic functionality. But I also want to talk about the new features because there's a timeliness factor here. One of the new features is an import-export capability, and that enables me to package a bunch of use cases in the plugin, and two of the use cases that I've packaged are related to Midsummer, and Midsummer is quickly running out, so I want to get it out there. I want to get a demo out there so people can see it and hopefully get some use out of it. So here's a matrix of the new features and also how they map to the use cases. Of the four use cases, one of them is useful all year round, and that is the Reforge reminders. That's a use case where when you attain a level, a character level that makes you available for a Reforge, then some sort of graphic or text comes up automatically to let you know. It would be nice if SSG put a message out letting you know that the Reforge was available, but they neglected to do that. So here's a way to do it. And plus you can do it, you can customize it more than you can normal level up messages. So the Reforge reminders use case uses one of the new features, which is the ability to have multiple patterns associated with an alert. In the Alerter plugin, Garan's plugin, you can only have one pattern defined per alert. Well, the Reforge reminders needs at least 5. So rather than have 5 alerts that you have to manage, this enables you to do that in one. So that is a use case, that is a config that you can use all year round. The other 3 that I've packaged are useful for festivals. And one of those is a fireworks launcher assist. This was inspired by some work that B4 did on his stream to the Festival Buddy plugin. And what it does is it puts a graphic on the screen to let you know which fireworks to launch or not to launch during the anniversary fireworks quest. Well, this does something very similar. But in order to do it, it needs to select from 8 different images. And rather than have a number of different alerts to do that, in addition to defining multiple patterns for the alert, which is the feature I mentioned previously, Also, it makes use of another feature, which is the parameterized image file path. So what does that mean? That means that depending on what you matched on the input side, you can choose which image file to select. So there are 8 different image files for that use case, but there's only one alert. And by parameterizing the selection of the image, you can make that maintainable and only have to deal with one alert. That one alert does have 10 patterns, though. One of the things that I want to point out about this plugin in general is that if you output text, you can choose between outputting text or outputting graphics. But if you output text, that text can be anything you want. You can customize that, and you can even customize it to the point where you can make it a different language. You know, the LOTRO client has French, English, and German versions, but if you want to output text in Russian or Norwegian or Slovenian or Turkish, you know, you would be able to do that, and therefore you would have a message that was familiar and easy to read in your native language. So the last 2 use cases I want to talk about are the ones that I'm going to demo and the ones that are timely. And the first one is a wine glass overlay. Now, I'm not going to give away any spoilers here, but let's just say that if you know what you're doing, you can always pick the correct wine glass the first time for the quest, the To the Last Drop quest during Midsummer. And I'm not going to explain in detail how to do that, and if you don't want spoilers, you may want to skip over that demo. But let's just say there's a graphical overlay that goes over the table that shows you what wine glasses are what, and helps you make that decision. So that particular one makes use of a new feature, which is the ability to trigger an alert without using pattern matching against chat messages. In other words, you can do it from the command line. You just say /genout space trigger space and then the name of the alert. And this is similar to a test function that's in the configuration setup utility. But if you wanted to use test, you'd have to have that configuration window open all the time. And as of right now, unless I change it, that's non-resizable. So it takes up a big chunk of your screen real estate and might actually overlap with the wine table. So that's not ideal. Also, because you can do it from the command line, you can make a shortcut out of it. And that's really the intended way to do that particular function. So I'm going to be demoing that. Just one little note, though, before I do the demo and talk about the other use case. There are different variations of that because of different graphical properties. And also, surprisingly, depending on what the race of your character is. If your character is a short race, like a hobbit or a dwarf or a stout ex-dwarf, then it turns out the way that the zoom works is different. The shorter races, when you zoom all the way in, it actually zooms further, which from a dimension standpoint makes sense. You're closer to the ground. So if you're looking down, you're going to zoom in further. The trouble with that is it chops off your view of the wine glass table. And it actually chops off some of the possible locations of the wine glasses. So for that reason, and also that the chopping off can also happen if you have anything other than a widescreen aspect ratio. So anything other than 16:9. So I have 3 different configs in 2 different images. One of the images is zoomed all the way in to the first person view, and the other one is zoomed out. And so there's those different variations. And then the last use case is for the Unhelpful Hounds quest in Midsummer. Now, that quest can be rather annoying, and most of the annoying aspects of it I can't really do much about from a plugin perspective. at least not this kind of plugin. But one of the annoying aspects is that the quest messages that come up in the middle of your screen, and I as far as I know, you can't change the position of those. Those messages have a persistence, and if you're generating those messages faster than they're displaying, they kind of back up in a queue, so that the messages can be displaying old information. That tends to be annoying because when you finally click on the hound that has the ring, you don't necessarily get the message for that right away in the middle of your screen. You do see it in the chat log, in the chat message box. So you could, I suppose, put that chat message box in the middle of your screen and increase the font size and make it a different color, but then all of your chat stuff is there and it's kind of awkward and gross. So what this does, it triggers on just the message that says that you successfully clicked on the hound that had the ring. And then you can put up either a text output, which you can customize to your heart's content with colors, fonts, sizes. You can make it flash, you can make it scroll, and so forth. Or you can put up a graphic, and I'll demo that. The Unhelpful Hounds, by the way, doesn't use any of the new capabilities other than the fact that you can just import that config and get it up and running quickly. But in theory, you could do exactly the same thing with LOTRO. You wouldn't need the new features of GenOut. All right, so let's start in on a demo here, and I'll start with the wineglass overlay. Here I am in the basement of the Splintered Shield, and I have a brand new pristine installation of GenOut. So in order to access the config utility, you say /genout space setup. And that brings up the configuration panel. You see there's no alerts defined. Everything is set to default values. So given that the selection of the alert says new, that fourth tab has the label import. Whenever you're set to the new alert, pseudo alert, that tab will say import. So let's head over there. Now I'm going to pick a file in my file system. And as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 different configs here, but I'm just going to go with probably what is the most common config, the most universal one, which is the zoomed out one, which is the wide version of zoomed out. So this would be for a 16:9 aspect ratio. All right, so I'm going to open that file, select all the text. If you're using Notepad or other kinds of text editors, usually a Control-A will select everything. Copy that into my copy-paste buffer, head back to the game, click on the Import tab, paste it, and save it. Now I have a working config, and it's the 16:9 aspect ratio, and it assumes that you're zoomed all the way out. So the idea is you get onto the table, you try to get as close to the middle of the table as possible, and also turn your camera so that the table is aligned horizontally as much as possible. All right, so now I'm going to create a shortcut. Actually, I could have done this shortcut before I hopped on the table and probably should have done that. But I'm going to create a shortcut. And if you're not familiar with making shortcuts, I would look at the page on LOTRO Wiki called Aliases and Shortcuts. But I happen to know that that open position there on my skill bar is position number 39. So I'm going to say /shortcut space 39 space /genout space trigger. This is the manual trigger feature. Now I'm going to get the name of alert. There is a requirement here that if your alert has white space in it, that you have to put it in single quotes, which You could change the name of this alert to just be wine glass, one word, or wine dash glass, or something that didn't have white space in it. But since it does have white space, I need to put those single quotes there. All right, so now I have a shortcut. If I click on that shortcut, then the image comes up. And you see the zoomed out version of the image has a yellow outline, which you want to match up to the edges of the table. And all of the operative symbology is in cyan, which shows up well against this greenish, brownish, reddish kind of background of the wine table. White is a little too stark. Anything that's darker has a tendency to get lost. Yellow has the problem that the tops of the wine glasses are kind of yellowish, and so the yellow can get lost in that. So the spoiler here, which I've avoided mentioning until now, is that there are always 8 incorrect wine glasses in specific positions. And you can see the incorrect ones are signified with the not symbol, the circle with the diagonal line through it. Those are the incorrect ones. So you position this overlay over the ones that are always there, which are incorrect. Then look at all the question marks to see if there's a wine glass under one of the question marks. Those are the possible positions of the correct wine glass. And you see that one is right there. So that tells you that that's the correct wine glass. Now, one of the problems with the zoomed out version, which was part of the reason why I created the zoomed in version, which is first person, is that some of the possible wine glass positions are directly beneath your character model. And so occasionally you just won't see any wine glass under a question mark. If by process of elimination you determine that none of the wine glasses are underneath any of the question marks, I would turn the camera or zoom in or out to see if the wine glass you want is under your character model. So that is a possibility. Again, the zoomed in version deals with this problem because it's a first person view, but as mentioned, zoomed in doesn't necessarily work for certain aspect ratios or certain races. Right, so now in the center of that overlay is an icon. And that icon is what's called a quick slot. If you click that icon, it'll do whatever that icon represents, as if you had put it on your skill bar. But also, because of the configuration of this alert, when you click it, it will not only perform the action, it will dismiss the overlay. It'll remove the overlay. So, in the absence of knowing what skills a character has, what aliases they have, what items they might be carrying around with them, what pets they may or may not have, what I've done is I've kind of defaulted to making that skill slot perform an emote. And then the emote that it performs is the nothing emote. Now the downside of that is people around you will see the message that your character name does nothing. Or if you have something selected, it'll say your character name does nothing with whatever it is you have selected. So it's not ideal. People might be a little bit puzzled why on earth you would execute an emote that literally does nothing, but does it loudly. So you can change that by taking an icon for a skill or a pet or an item and moving it over to the quick slot. Just be aware, if you click on a skill, it'll try to execute that skill. If you click on an item, it'll do whatever the right click is defined for that item. So if it's consumable, it'll consume it. So that might not be ideal. You could put an alias there, put a pet there, as I mentioned previously. My preference is to take an item that does nothing when you right-click it. Many items are like that. If you have a task item, for instance, then it would do that. If you have one of those bounties from an instance or a skirmish, that doesn't do anything when you right-click it. Crafting, various kinds of crafting items don't do anything when you right-click on them, like like ore or cooking items, things like that, herbs. So I would drag an item over there, but you do have to have it in your inventory in order to drag it. So that's the wineglass overlay. Let's move to the Unhelpful Hounds. And as I mentioned previously, the problem that I'm trying to solve here is the queuing problem. The fact that if you're going around clicking on a bunch of hounds, that the messages about the hound not being the correct hound may keep popping up even after you click on the correct one. So this alleviates that problem because it puts up a message immediately when you click the correct hound, because it's watching the chat log for that specific message. So to import this, you just bring up the setup utility, select the new pseudo alert, go to the import tab. Now in your file system, it'll be under Unhelpful Hounds, and click on that file, select all the text, copy it back to the game, the import tab, paste that, and then save it. Now you have a working alert. All right, so let's put it through its paces. I'm going to run around and click on some hounds. And there's the correct one. And you see there's an image there, and it's flashing. And that image symbolically represents a hound with a ring. So that's the default configuration, is to use that constructed image that I created in order to come up. Now you could change the size of that and the position. You could stretch it. You could move it around. You could have it not flash if you wanted to. You could have it stay up longer or shorter amount of time if you wanted to. It's very, very customizable. Another thing you do, if you really want to, is if you don't like that image, you can put an image of your choice. To do that, you need to put it under the resources directory. That image file path is relative to the resources subdirectory of the plugin directory. So here is an example where I replaced that canned image with an image of my cat. There he is, lounging away in his hammock, a candid photo. So you could put any image you wanted there. Another thing you can do is you can make that a text output, which in a way is kind of redundant because there's already a text output. But you could make it much larger. You could put it in a different position than the chat window. You could make it flash. You could make it scroll. And as I mentioned previously, if you wanted to, you could output a message of your choice in a language of your choice. So if you're Dutch, maybe a Dutch message or some other language. So hopefully that helps people understand what this plugin is all about, and maybe people will get some value out of those use cases for Midsummer and the remaining few days of Midsummer. But even if not, some of the other use cases, the Reforge reminders, could be useful all year round if you're leveling. And the anniversary one will be useful in another 9 or 10 months. So thanks for watching the video, and hopefully I'll put out some more detailed, in-depth videos of the plugin at a later point, but I just wanted to get this out there for Midsummer.